One young girl, one final stand. In a town boiling with hatred and fear, the only person who dared speak out was someone everyone expected to stay quiet. But what really happened in Redemption Creek the day the Comanche died? You'll want to hear this. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town of Redemption Creek in the summer of 1878. Dust swirled through the main street as Sarah Wilson, a 16-year-old girl with wheat-colored hair and determined blue eyes, made her way toward her father's general store. The wooden buildings of the town seemed to wilt under the oppressive heat, their paint peeling away like skin after a bad sunburn. Sarah wiped the sweat from her brow as she passed the saloon, where the sounds of raucous laughter and piano music spilled onto the street. She clutched her basket of freshly picked berries closer to her chest, quickening her pace. Her mother had warned her to stay away from that part of town, especially when the cattle drivers were passing through. The town of Redemption Creek had grown considerably in the 5 years since the railroad had connected it to the rest of civilization. What had once been a small outpost was now a bustling community with a church, school, and numerous businesses. With progress, however, came tension. The native Comanche, who had once freely roamed these lands, were now confined to reservations. Their way of life systematically destroyed. As Sarah rounded the corner, she noticed a small commotion near the blacksmith's shop. A group of men had gathered in a tight circle, their postures rigid with hostility. Curiosity getting the better of her, Sarah moved closer, staying partially hidden behind a water trough. "You ain't welcome here, Injun," she heard one of the men spit out. "Your kind belongs on the reservation." That's when Sarah saw him, a young Comanche man, perhaps no more than 20 years old, standing tall despite being surrounded. He wore a mixture of traditional clothing and white man's attire, buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt, and his long black hair was tied back with a leather strip. His face remained stoic, betraying no fear, though he was clearly outnumbered. "I come to trade," the Comanche replied in accented but clear English. "I have permission from the Indian agent." "We don't care what papers you got," another man said, shoving the Comanche backward. "Folks around here haven't forgotten what your people did to the Mitchell family." Sarah felt her heart race. The Mitchell massacre had happened 3 years ago, when a rogue band of Comanche had attacked a homestead, killing the parents and 2 children. It had fueled anti-Indian sentiment throughout the region, despite the fact that most Comanche had been peaceful since being forced onto reservations. "That was not my band," the young man said calmly. "I am Dakota of the Panatika Comanche. We have kept the peace." The largest man in the group, whom Sarah recognized as Tom Blackwood, a local rancher known for his violent temper, stepped forward. "All you redskins are the same to me," he growled, his hand moving to the pistol on his hip. Without thinking, Sarah stepped out from her hiding place. "Stop it," she called out, her voice sounding smaller than she'd intended. "He hasn't done anything wrong." All eyes turned to her, including the surprised gaze of the Comanche man. For a moment, there was silence. "Go on home, girl," Blackwood said, his tone softer but still menacing. "This ain't no business for a lady." "My father says the law applies to everyone," Sarah replied, summoning her courage. "If this man has permission to be here, you have no right to threaten him." Blackwood's face darkened with anger, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" Sheriff James Miller approached, his badge glinting in the sunlight. The men shifted uncomfortably, none eager to explain their actions to the law. These men were threatening him, Sarah said, pointing to the Comanche. "He says he has permission to trade in town." Sheriff Miller, a fair man who had fought in the Civil War and had little patience for mob justice, looked at the young Comanche. "Let me see your papers, son," With deliberate movements, Dakota reached into a small pouch and produced a folded document, which he handed to the sheriff. Miller read it carefully, then nodded. Everything seems in order. This man has permission from the reservation agent to conduct trade in town. He looked at the gathering of men with stern disapproval. I suggest you all go about your business. And Blackwood, I'd better not hear about you causing trouble again. The men dispersed reluctantly, Blackwood throwing one last hateful glance at Dakota before walking away. The sheriff nodded to Sarah and continued on his patrol, leaving her alone with the Comanche. Thank you, Dakota said simply, his dark eyes studying her with curiosity. Sarah felt suddenly self-conscious. Interactions between white settlers and Native Americans were rare and generally discouraged. It wasn't right, what they were doing. She replied. A small smile touched Dakota's lips. Not all white eyes see with hatred. This is good to know. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small carved wooden bird, offering it to her. For your courage. Sarah hesitated, then accepted. The gift, it's beautiful, she said, admiring the detailed craftsmanship. The mockingbird sings many songs but keeps its own voice, Dakota explained. Like you, it speaks when others are silent. Before Sarah could respond, she heard her name being called. Her father was standing outside their store, waving her over. With a concerned expression. I have to go, she said, tucking the wooden bird into her basket. Be careful in town. Dakota nodded, his expression solemn. I will return to the reservation before sunset. It is safer there, even if it is not home. As Sarah walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred. Little did she know that this brief encounter would change both their lives forever. 2 weeks passed since Sarah's encounter with Dakota. Life in Redemption Creek continued its predictable rhythm, but Sarah found herself thinking about the young Comanche man often. The wooden mockingbird sat on the windowsill in her bedroom. A reminder of a moment of courage that felt increasingly distant. The Wilson family store served as the heart of Redemption Creek's commerce. Sarah's father, Henry Wilson, was a respected businessman who had settled in Texas after the Civil War, bringing his Philadelphia values with him. Unlike many frontier merchants, he dealt fairly with everyone, including the occasional Native American customers who ventured into town. Sarah, could you please arrange these new fabrics on the shelf? Her father asked, gesturing to a shipment that had arrived on the morning train. Your mother will be by later to help with the inventory. As Sarah organized the colorful bolts of cloth, the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Tom Blackwood entering, followed by 2 of his ranch hands. The atmosphere in the store immediately tensed. Morning, Wilson, Blackwood said, removing his hat. Need some supplies for the ranch. Sugar, coffee, and ammunition. Henry nodded professionally, though Sarah knew her father disliked the rancher. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. I'll gather those items for you. While her father collected the supplies, Blackwood's gaze wandered around the store until it landed on Sarah. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. Miss Wilson, he said, tipping his head. Heard you've taken a shine to the local savages. Quite the talk of the town. Sarah felt her face flush with both embarrassment and anger. I simply believed in fair treatment, Mr. Blackwood, nothing more. Blackwood chuckled. Fair treatment. Tell that to the settlers who've lost their scalps. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. That Comanche you defended? Word is he's been sneaking off the reservation regularly. Makes a person wonder what he's really up to. Before Sarah could respond, her father returned with Blackwood's order. That'll be $3.45, he said curtly. The transaction completed in tense silence. As Blackwood turned to leave, he paused. Just so you know, Wilson, some folks in town are starting to question where your loyalties lie. Might want to have a word with your daughter about choosing her causes more carefully. After they left, Henry Wilson sighed heavily. Sarah, What was that about? Sarah explained the incident with Dakota, watching her father's expression shift from concern to understanding. You did the right thing standing up for that young man, he said after a moment. But Blackwood is dangerous, and this town has a long memory when it comes to the Indian Wars. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Promise me you'll be more careful. Sarah nodded, though she felt a flicker of defiance. Yes, father. Later that afternoon, Sarah volunteered to deliver a package to Mrs. Abernathy, the schoolteacher, who lived on the outskirts of town. The walk would give her time to clear her head and escape the stifling atmosphere of the store. The path to Mrs. Abernathy's small house took Sarah along the edge of Willow Creek, where the cottonwood trees provided welcome shade. As she walked, she heard the sound of splashing water. Curious, she moved closer to the creek and was startled to see Dakota kneeling by the water, filling a leather canteen. He sensed her presence immediately, turning with the fluid grace of a practiced hunter. Recognition replaced wariness in his eyes. The mockingbird returns, he said, standing. I thought you went back to the reservation, Sarah replied, keeping a respectable distance but not retreating. I come and go, Dakota explained. The agent allows some of us to hunt and gather off the reservation, our rations. He paused, searching for the right words. They are not enough. Sarah knew about the conditions on the reservations, the poor quality food, the disease, the despair. Her father had called it a slow death. Is that why you were in town that day? To trade for food? Dakota nodded. And medicine. My sister's son is sick with the coughing sickness. Consumption? Sarah asked, concerned. The disease was common and deadly. Yes, the white doctor at the reservation has no more medicine. Sarah hesitated, then made a decision. Wait here, she said. I'll be back. She hurried to Mrs. Abernathy's house, delivered the package, and then made her way to Dr. Peterson's office on the other side of town. The doctor had treated her family for years and kept a small pharmacy in his back room. Sarah, what brings you here today? Dr. Peterson asked kindly. I need medicine for consumption, she replied directly. It's for a friend's family. The doctor raised an eyebrow but asked no further questions. He prepared a small bottle of syrup and gave her instructions for its use. Sarah paid with the money she had been saving for a new book. When she returned to the creek, she half expected Dakota to be gone, but he was still there, sitting patiently beneath a tree. This might help your nephew, she said, offering the bottle. It's not a cure, but it will ease his coughing and help him sleep. Dakota took the medicine, genuine surprise and gratitude in his expression. Why would you do this for people you do not know? Sarah thought for a moment. Because it's the right thing to do. And because. She hesitated. I would like to understand your people better. All I've ever heard are stories of raids and violence. A shadow passed over Dakota's face. There has been wrong done on both sides. My people lose their lands, their way of life. Some fight back with hatred. Others, like my family, try to find a new path. He carefully tucked the medicine into his pouch. If you truly wish to understand, meet me here in 3 days. I will bring my sister to thank you for your kindness. The offer was both tempting and frightening. Meeting with Dakota away from town could cause problems for her family if discovered. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Then the choice is yours, he said simply. But know that not all paths that seem dangerous lead to harm. As they parted ways, Sarah felt the weight of the decision before her. She had been raised to see beyond prejudice, but she was not naive about the realities of frontier life. The tensions between settlers and Native Americans had created deep wounds that had not yet healed. What she couldn't know was that Tom Blackwood had followed her from town, watching her interaction with Dakota from a distance, his mind already formulating a plan that would bring tragedy to Redemption Creek. 3 days later, Sarah found herself returning to Willow Creek. her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had told her mother she was going to collect wildflowers for the store, not entirely a lie, as she carried a small basket for that purpose. The afternoon was cooler than usual, with clouds gathering on the horizon, promising a much-needed summer rain. As Sarah approached the meeting spot, she saw not only Dakota, but also a young woman and a small boy of perhaps 5 years. The woman resembled Dakota, with the same proud bearing, though her face was marked by worry. The child leaned against her, looking pale and tired. "You came," Dakota said, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I said I would." Dakota introduced his sister, Nasha, and her son, Ahot. Nasha stepped forward, her eyes searching Sarah's face. "My brother says you gave medicine for my son," she said in halting English. "The coughing is less now, I thank you." Sarah smiled, genuinely pleased. "I'm glad it helped. How is he feeling?" As if in answer, the boy coughed, though less severely than Sarah had feared. Nasha stroked his hair lovingly. "Better, but the sickness comes and goes." They sat together by the creek, the initial awkwardness gradually giving way to cautious conversation. Nasha showed Sarah how to weave a small basket from reeds growing along the water's edge, while Ahot watched with curious eyes. Despite the language barrier, Sarah found herself enjoying their company, especially when Ahot's shy smile emerged during a game of stones that Dakota taught her. "Your people lived here for a long time before the settlers came, didn't they?" Sarah asked as they worked. Dakota nodded. "For many generations. This creek, these trees, they know the songs of my ancestors." "I'm sorry for what happened," Sarah said softly, surprising herself with the admission. Nasha looked up from her weaving. "The past cannot be undone. We look to tomorrow now." "What is tomorrow like on the reservation?" Sarah asked out the siblings. Exchanged glances. "Hard," Dakota finally replied. "Our ways are forbidden. Children like Ahot are sent to white schools to forget their language. The land they give us cannot support our people. Many die." The stark reality of their situation settled heavily over the conversation. Sarah felt a wave of shame for the comfortable life she led while others suffered so greatly. "Is there nothing that can be done?" she asked. "We survive," Dakota said. "Simply, and we remember who we are." As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds rolled in, bringing a sudden drop in temperature. Nasha gathered Ahot close, concerned about the coming rain affecting his condition. "We should return to the reservation," she said to Dakota. "The agent will be counting heads soon." Dakota nodded, then turned to Sarah. "Thank you for coming. Few would have the courage. Will I see you again?" The question escaped before Sarah could consider its implications. A ghost of a smile touched Dakota's lips. "I hunt in these woods every 3rd day. The creek is a good place to rest." They parted ways as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Sarah hurried back toward town, her mind filled with new perspectives and questions. She had been taught that the Indian problem was complex, but meeting Dakota and his family had made it personal in a way no textbook ever could. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the rider approaching until he was almost upon her. Tom Blackwood sat atop his horse, rain streaming down his broad-brimmed hat, his expression unreadable. "Bit far from town, aren't you, Miss Wilson?" he said, his voice dangerously calm. Sarah clutched her basket tighter. "I was collecting flowers." "Mr. Blackwood." The rain caught me by surprise. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Funny, I could have sworn I saw you talking with that Comanche buck and his family." He dismounted, his imposing figure blocking her path. "Now why would a respectable girl like you be consorting with savages?" Fear trickled down Sarah's spine, colder than the raindrops soaking her dress. "They mean no harm. They're just trying to survive." "Survive?" Blackwood spat on the ground. They survive on government handouts while decent folk work themselves to the bone. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I wonder what your father would think of his daughter becoming an Indian lover. Sarah stepped back, her heel catching on a root, nearly causing her to fall. Please let me pass, Mr. Blackwood. My parents will be worried. Blackwood studied her for a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. You know, my wife and child were killed by Comanches during a raid 6 years ago. Did your new friends tell you about that? About how they butchered innocent women and children? Sarah remained silent, unsure how to respond to his pain and anger. I'll be watching you, Miss Wilson, Blackwood finally said, mounting his horse. Again, and I'll be watching that Comanche too. There's only one good Indian, and that's a dead Indian, Sarah finished, her voice barely audible over the rain. So I've heard. Blackwood's expression hardened. Remember where your loyalties should lie, girl. With that, he spurred his horse and rode toward town, leaving Sarah trembling in the downpour. By the time she reached home, Sarah was soaked to the skin and chilled to the bone. Her mother fussed over her, insisting she change immediately and drink hot tea by the fire. Sarah said nothing about her encounter with Blackwood or the Comanche family. But that night, her dreams were troubled by images of violence and the sound of rain mingling with tears. The next morning, Sheriff Miller visited the Wilson store. His expression was grave as he asked to speak with Sarah privately. I understand you've been spending time with a young Comanche man, he said without preamble once they were seated in the store's back room. Sarah felt her father's surprised gaze upon her. Who told you that? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Tom Blackwood came to me with concerns, the sheriff replied. Now I'm not one to interfere in folks' private matters, but these are sensitive times. Blackwood has a lot of influence in this town, and he's stirring up trouble, saying this Comanche might be scouting for a raiding party. That's ridiculous, Sarah exclaimed. Dakota is peaceful. He's just trying to help his family survive, Sheriff Miller sighed. I believe you, Sarah, but not everyone will. I'm asking you, for your own safety and for the safety of this Comanche man, to be more discreet. Blackwood's got a posse of men who listen to him, and they've been drinking heavily since yesterday. The sheriff's warning hung in the air like a storm cloud. Sarah looked to her father, expecting disappointment or anger, but instead saw concern and a deep weariness. Thank you for the warning, Sheriff, Henry Wilson said, placing a supportive hand on his daughter's shoulder. We'll handle this as a family. After the sheriff left, Sarah braced herself for her father's reproach, but it never came. Is what the sheriff said true? He asked quietly. Sarah nodded, then explained everything, the medicine for Ahote, the peaceful meeting by the creek, and Blackwood's threatening behavior. Henry Wilson listened silently, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. When she finished, he simply asked, Do you understand the danger you've placed yourself in? That you've placed this young man in? I didn't mean to cause trouble, Sarah replied, tears welling in her eyes. They're just people, Father, people who need help. Her father embraced her gently. I know, sweetheart. Your mother and I raised you to see beyond prejudice. But the world isn't always ready for such understanding. He pulled back, his expression serious. Promise me you won't meet with them again, at least not until this blows over. Sarah promised, though her heart ached at the thought of never seeing Dakota, Nasha, and little Ahote again. She couldn't know that her promise would be broken by circumstances beyond her control, or that the coming day would bring violence that would change Redemption Creek forever. The storm that had been building for days finally broke over Redemption Creek with frightening intensity. Thunder rattled windows as lightning split the sky, illuminating the town in brief, ghostly flashes. Most residents stayed indoors, grateful for the shelter of solid walls. Sarah stood by the window of her family's living quarters above the store, watching rainwater cascade down the street in muddy rivers. Her thoughts were as turbulent as the weather, torn between her promise to her father and her concern for Dakota's family. Were they safe on the reservation? Had Ahote's condition worsened in the damp weather? A knock on her bedroom door pulled her from her thoughts. Her mother entered, carrying a steaming cup of tea. "You've been quiet today," Elizabeth Wilson said, setting the tea on Sarah's bedside table. "Your father told me about your meeting with the Comanche family." Sarah turned from the window, bracing for disapproval. "Are you angry with me?" Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. "No, dear. Concerned, yes, but not angry." When Sarah joined her, she continued, "You know, before I met your father, I worked with the Quakers helping freed slaves after the war. Many people disapproved of that work, too." "Really?" Sarah had never heard this story before. Her mother nodded. "The right path isn't always the easy one. But we must also be wise about how we walk it." She squeezed Sarah's hand. "Your father and I are proud of your compassion, but these are dangerous times. Tom Blackwood has been in the saloon all day, drinking and talking about Indian problems. What if Dakota or his family come back to town?" Sarah asked, her worry evident. "Blackwood might hurt them." "Sheriff Miller will handle it," Elizabeth assured her, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "Now try to get some sleep. The storm should pass by morning." But sleep eluded Sarah. She lay awake listening to the storm, her mind creating increasingly troubling scenarios. Just before dawn, exhaustion finally claimed her, but her rest was short-lived. The sound of shouting jerked her awake. Sunlight streamed through her window, indicating the storm had passed, but the commotion outside suggested a different kind of tempest had arrived. Sarah rushed to the window. A crowd had gathered in the street below, centered around the hitching post in front of the saloon. With horror, she saw Dakota kneeling in the mud, his hands bound behind him, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Tom Blackwood stood over him, pistol in hand, addressing the growing audience. Without thinking, Sarah threw on a dress and rushed downstairs, ignoring her mother's startled call. She burst onto the street just as Blackwood was shouting, "This Comanche was caught stealing horses from my ranch. We all know what that means. He's scouting for a war party." "That's a lie," Sarah cried out, pushing through the crowd. All eyes turned to her, including Dakota's. His expression flickered between surprise and resignation. Blackwood's face darkened with anger. "Get back inside, girl. This isn't your concern. Where's Sheriff Miller?" Sarah demanded, looking around desperately for any sign of the lawman. "Road out to the Peterson farm," someone in the crowd replied. "Won't be back till noon," Blackwood smirked. "Convenient timing. But justice doesn't wait for the law to arrive." He turned to the crowd. "This Indian was on my property at dawn. My men caught him red-handed with a rope, heading for the corral." "I was hunting," Dakota said, his voice steady despite his obvious pain. "I did not go near your horses." "Liar!" Blackwood backhanded him across the face, sending Dakota sprawling in the mud. "We found you with stolen goods from town, too. A bottle of medicine that could only have come from Doc Peterson's office." Sarah's blood ran cold, the medicine she had given for Ahote. "He didn't steal it," she said, stepping forward. "I gave it to him for his nephew who's sick with consumption." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah's father pushed through to stand beside her, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "That's enough, Blackwood," Henry Wilson said firmly. "Wait for the sheriff to return and handle this properly." "Properly?" Blackwood laughed bitterly. "Like how the army properly handles Indians. With treaties they break before the ink is dry?" He pointed at Sarah. "Your daughter's been meeting with this savage, Wilson. Maybe you should get your own house in order before telling others what to do." Sarah felt her father tense beside her, but was surprised when the town's minister, Reverend Davis, stepped forward. Tom, this isn't the Christian way, the Reverend said calmly. If this young man has committed a crime, he deserves a fair trial. Trial? Blackwood spat on the ground. My wife and son never got a trial before Comanches butchered them. The crowd's mood was shifting, some nodding in agreement with Blackwood, others looking uncomfortable with the vigilante justice unfolding before them. Sarah locked eyes with Dakota, seeing not fear but a deep sadness. She realized with startling clarity that he had expected this all along, had perhaps been waiting for the inevitable moment when the fragile peace would shatter. Please, she addressed the crowd. Dakota has done nothing wrong. His family is peaceful. They're starving on the reservation, trying to care for a sick child. He was probably hunting for food when he crossed Mr. Blackwood's land. And how would you know so much about his family, Miss Wilson? Blackwood challenged, his tone insinuating something improper. Before Sarah could respond, Dakota spoke, his voice carrying despite its softness. She speaks truth. I hunt to feed my sister and her son. The medicine was a gift, not stolen. He looked directly at Blackwood. I did not go near your horses. I know what such an accusation means for my people. For a moment, it seemed the crowd might be swayed by his dignity. Then one of Blackwood's ranch hands pushed forward, holding up a piece of rope. Found this on him, the man said. Same kind we used to tie our horses, and he was carrying this. He produced a small knife with an ornate handle that Sarah recognized as belonging to the general store. Henry Wilson frowned. That's from my inventory. But I never sold it to him. Blackwood's triumphant expression told Sarah everything. He's been stealing from right under your nose, Wilson. Probably planning which of your women to take when his war party arrives. The crowd's mood darkened further. Someone shouted, "String him up," and others took up the cry. No, Sarah screamed, trying to move toward Dakota, but her father held her back. Stop this madness, Henry Wilson shouted. This is murder, not justice, but the mob's blood was up. Men grabbed Dakota, dragging him toward a large oak tree at the end of the street. Blackwood walked behind, a coil of rope in his hands. His face set in grim satisfaction. Sarah broke free from her father's grasp and ran after them. Please, she begged, grabbing at Blackwood's arm. He's innocent. You're killing an innocent man. Blackwood shoved her away. Get her out of here, Wilson, or I swear she'll regret interfering. As men threw the rope over a sturdy branch, Sarah made one last desperate attempt. She ran to Dakota and placed herself in front of him, facing the crowd. If you do this, she said, her voice shaking but determined, you're no better than the raiders you condemn. You're worse because you claim to be civilized. A hush fell over the gathering. For one hopeful moment, Sarah thought she might have reached them. Then Blackwood stepped forward, his expression cold. Move aside, girl, he said quietly, or I'll have you moved. Sarah, Dakota whispered behind her. Go, this is not your fight. It is, she replied without turning. It became mine the moment I saw the truth. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sarah would later struggle to piece it together. Someone grabbed her from behind, pulling her away from Dakota. There was a scuffle, shouts, and then the deafening crack of a pistol being fired. When the chaos cleared, Dakota lay on the ground, blood spreading across his chest. Blackwood stood over him, gun still smoking in his hand. He was trying to escape, Blackwood said. Though no one had seen Dakota make any such attempt, Sarah broke free and rushed to Dakota's side, cradling his head in her lap. His eyes found hers, a faint smile touching his lips. The mockingbird sings. Many songs, he whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Remember ... your own voice. Someone get the doctor. Sarah cried, pressing her hands against the wound in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. Dakota's eyes glazed over, fixed on a sky he would never see again. A strange silence fell over the crowd, the reality of what they had allowed to happen settling heavily upon them. Sheriff Miller arrived minutes later too. Late to prevent the tragedy, but in time to arrest Tom Blackwood for murder. As Dakota's body was carried away, Sarah remained kneeling in the dirt, her dress stained with his blood, her hands trembling. In the days that followed, the town of redemption Creek was subdued, a collective shame hanging over it, like the storm clouds that had preceded the violence. Tom Blackwood would stand trial for murder, though many doubted a white jury would convict him for killing an Indian. Sarah accompanied her father to the reservation to deliver the news to Nasha and to return Dakota's belongings. The grief in the young woman's eyes as she clutched her son to her chest would haunt Sarah for years to come. He knew, Nasha said softly as they prepared to leave. He knew the danger, but still believed some bridges could be built. Sarah pulled the wooden mockingbird from her pocket and tried to return it, but Nasha closed Sarah's fingers around it. "Keep it," she said. "Remember him. Remember that one voice can matter, even when it seems no one listens." As they rode back to town, Sarah made a silent promise to that effect. She would not let Dakota's death be meaningless. She would continue to speak for those whose voices were silenced, to stand for justice even when it was unpopular. The mockingbird would sing many songs, but always in its own true voice.